Good morning and welcome to Moments with Melinda. My name is Melinda Moulton and my guest today is Christine Hallquist. How are you?
I am, every day is joy for me. So it's pretty steady, happy person.
You're a person who makes a lot happen. So we're going to delve into that today in a big way. But let me share with my viewers a little bit about you. Christine Hallquist is the executive director of the Vermont Community Broadband Board. She is the former CEO of Vermont Electric Co-Operative. She was the first openly transgender major party nominee for governor in the United States, winning the 2018 Democratic nomination for governor of Vermont with over 40% of the vote. I mean, that was amazing. Christine has drawn national attention as a pioneering example of a CEO transitioning while in office. And this transition was documented in a film by her son titled Denial. Christine Hallquist is an executive innovator and leader with vast experience driving operational technology, business development, renewable energy, and utility transformation. And she is a pianist, as you will see with the piano behind her. Good morning, Christine.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure to see you.
And I also want to add, before we dig into this, that you're also the town moderator for the town meeting in the village of Hyde Park. So let's start at the beginning. Share with us a little bit about your childhood. You grew up in Baldwinsville, New York, and you are one of 7 children.
Well, yes, we were pretty much a traditional white family in a white community that was a middle class suburb. It's a lot was said and a lot was not said. So growing up, I was always knew I was different. Right from my first memory, I knew I was different. But and I struggled with that. Certainly I got beat up on my way to school and on my way home from school. And of course, my parents entered us into Catholic school. So I even got beat up at school by the nuns. And when I was 7th grade, they labeled me as gifted, which they had some expectations about how I was supposed to behave as a gifted child who was different. But I questioned a lot of things about their spiritual teachings. For example, I would give them a really rough time to say, how could a loving God create hell? Those kind of things. In 8th grade, the Monsignor called my parents and said, we think David, that was my dead name, David, needs an exorcism. And my parents, I think this was the one event that really shaped my life. They said to the Monsignor, there's nothing wrong with my son. We're taking all of our kids out of Catholic school and, we're not going to church anymore. So that was a very powerful statement for me. And so anyway, I went to public school, so the beating stopped at school, but I continued to get beat up. But by 9th grade, when I got to high school, I learned how to act like a man. I toughened up, and then all of a sudden, all the beating stopped, and so I carried that through my whole life. I needed to act like a man.
Did your parents know that? Did your parents realize and your siblings realize that you were a woman? You were a girl?
Yes. In fact, my mother, when I was 11 years old, she dressed me up as Little Bo Peep for Halloween. And I told my mother at that point that I wanted to be a girl. Oh. And she said, never say that again. And I really respected my parents. My parents, I'm not going to overglorify them. They had issues, but they also did great things. And my mother said at that point, don't ever say that again. And I don't know what it meant, but I respected my mother. But I found later on, a few years later, that they put people in mental institutions at that time for thinking they weren't part of their gender. So I realized she was protecting me.
Wow. That's incredible. How are your siblings with all of this?
Well, my siblings didn't have any idea, it's,
How many sisters did you have?
I had two sisters and four brothers.
Did you identify more with your sisters?
Oh, yes. I've always been close to my sisters. It was the trio. Unfortunately, one of my sisters died about 5 years ago, but we've always been close from day one. It was really the sisters, of course, I'll be the alleged sister, but, the sisters, and it was the sisters against the brothers kind of thing growing up.
It's amazing. So share with my viewers the early years of your professional life before you came to Vermont.
Well, my father was a wonderful electrical engineer, and I used to go to work with him. And he had this wave solder machine, and I didn't realize at the time I was learning so much outside of school. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I was working with wave solder machines, designing my own circuits. I would be able to take components off the shelf as long as I logged them in. And but I clearly was a non-traditional student. My father wanted me to go to be an electrical engineer. I hated school, so I compromised and got an associate's degree in electronics. And I went to work for Digital Equipment Corporation, which grew to be the second largest computer company. So it was a fast-growing, typical startup. But when I interviewed for the job, it was pretty funny because they told me I was colorblind and I couldn't get the job as a technician. And I said to the hiring supervisor, "Go get me a handful of wires and I'll tell you what color they are." And he brought them down, he showed me, and he said, "Okay." And then he said, "Okay, you're hired," because I could identify all the colors, even though I was partially colorblind. But anyway, when I started working as a technician on the production line, I would look at the circuits and say, "Why did you design with this resistor?" I would call the design engineers up and say, "Why did you put this resistor in the circuit? You're just asking for trouble. You should do this." And they said, "Who is this person?" So they quickly put me in an engineering program so I became a trained engineer. But quickly, I rapidly escalated in the company to the point where I became the global power systems manufacturing manager at age 30. And I was actually so familiar with some of the what they called military specs at the time that I was I was assigned the job of diagnosing failures for like the Apollo's mission and all that kind of thing. And they even the VP of engineering took me over to Europe to do some education. And there was a funny story because I had so much respect in the company. At one point, a couple of engineers from around the country came up to Vermont because we had a meeting, and I'm driving in the car with them. They said, "Well, where did you get your engineering degree?" I said, "I don't have an engineering degree." And it shocked them. It was such a funny moment and then the other three of them said, "Well, don't you think you should go get one?" I said, "Why don't you you obviously respect me." They were paused. I caught them off completely off guard. I said, "I learn more by working than I do going to school." Is what I told them.
You're right.
And there was a real important event that happened that really took me into another leadership role. So when I got the job of in charge of power systems, we had computer automation, robotics, all these things running in the factory. And there was this older gentleman who said to me, he says, if you just got rid of all this inventory, you wouldn't need all these robotics. He caught me by curiosity because Digital was using this factory to sell all their software. So I quietly asked him, "Well, help me understand what you said." He says, "Buy this little green book called the Toyota Manufacturing Process." I bought the book. I implemented. 6 months, we took the time to build a power supply from 12 weeks to less than one. I got designated as one of the most important companies of 100 people in the company, about 120,000. So when the company started going out of business, I started freelance consulting, and I worked with all kinds of companies, including Honda. Honda hired me for 2.5 years to come through the complete process of their automobile. So I was out in Torrance, California 1 week a month, and they sent me to Dodge test track out to Marysville. That's how I ended up I realized I was traveling too much for the family. I decided to build my local clientele, started to work with utilities, and that's what brought me to Vermont Electric Co-op, 12 miles down the road. They were in bankruptcy. They asked me to help them. In late 1999, my interview went like this: "Why don't you come work for us?" The board said. I said, "What do I know about utilities?" They said, "Look, you were an engineer in power systems." So I went and bought a book, How to Design Electric Utility Networks. I took the job. Stowe at the time was going to leave the system because their performance was too bad. And I said to them, "I will redesign your transmission line to Stowe. I'll get it done in 9 months, and I'll meet with you. If you still want to leave the system, I'll help you leave." And so I designed the first network. 9 months later, they said they're not leaving. That's really kind of, I'll let you take it from there.
Well, you know what? Well, you know what? They were right. They were right in seventh grade when they said you were gifted, because you are gifted. I think you are probably a genius. So now I want you to share with us. I've been on Vermont Electric Co-op for 53 years. That's our electrical company. But I want you to share with us your work at Vermont Electric Co-op and your experience when you transitioned while still the CEO there. Share a little bit about that experience.
Oh, that was the biggest fear in my whole life come to realization. In 2014, I got stage 3 cancer, and they really thought I was going to die. And I personally announced brought the company together, announced that they need to be prepared. Well, when it came to transition, I reached out to the human resource manager. I said, "You got to help me with this transition. We need to figure out how to announce it." And she said, "Well, you just, a year ago, you announced your possible death." I said, "This is a fear worse than death for me, the transition, especially running a highly masculine company. Me thinking about facing these line workers in our 4 district as a transgender woman just was really scary." So, we prepared the company. The human resource manager did a great job preparing them. I did, at the time, I did some research. I wanted to find a CEO who had transitioned while on the job. Well, I couldn't find any, so I had to develop my own plan. The good news is I was a member of a CEO group that met monthly. And of course, Mary Powell from Green Mountain Power was there. The Darn Tough Stocks, really some leading CEOs in the country. And each month in the state, each month we would meet and talk about issues. And we would say which issue we were under NDA for each other. We would identify the issues, and then we'd determine which one to work on. When I announced to them I was going to transition, they dedicated 2 of their monthly meetings to help me build the plan. And the great thing is when I walked I scheduled the whole announcement, and I gave exclusive rights to WCAX in 7 days. But I did this during the Pride event in 2015. 11 of those CEOs walked with me at that Pride event. It was such a proud moment for Vermont, I think.
Unbelievable. Well, I remember that. When you came out, and I didn't know you at all. I knew who you were, but I didn't know you. And I went out and I found a card with a bright
yes.
apple red stiletto, 6-inch heel on it. That's all that was on this white with a white background. And I wrote you a letter and told you
And I still have that letter.
Yeah, and how much you meant to me. Now, in 2018, you decided to run for governor. You ran on increased broadband access, universal health care, and aggressive action against climate change. I want you to talk about that extraordinary moment in your life when Politico actually rated the race lean Republican, one step from a toss-up, and you garnered 40% of the vote. Talk about that time in your life.
Well, let me just tell you, that run for governor was quite impulsive, and at the same time, it made sense. When Trump got elected in 2016, I decided I could not be politically passive anymore. So I went to the Women's March down in DC right after the inauguration of Trump. And I went to the climate march and I started marching and I realized things are not changing. So that was kind of the background to 2018. When I went down to it was this Women's March Day, but they called it the Youth March. My friend, Brenda Churchill, we were driving down together and she kept harassing me, saying, "You have to run for governor." I said, "No way I'm going to run for governor. That's just ridiculous." Well, when I got to Montpelier, there was an individual, I won't name that person, but you'll probably figure out who it was, who asked me to sign their petition to run for governor. And that person really struck me as a misogynist. And I'm thinking to myself, is that the best that the Democrats can do right now? That's really sad. That was just went through my head. We did the march, and I got to listen to the youth presenting, and there were 4 young women, Muslim women, who were doing slam poetry on the harassment they were receiving in their schools. And I realized, this is my state. I've always considered us a welcoming and open state. These young, poor Muslim women are suffering. I'm going to run for governor.
Good for you.
I had no idea what I was doing.
So,
and then when I announced it to my board, everybody was shocked, including my family.
And you garnered 40% of the vote. You probably should have run again. Well, I want to talk about the film that your son Derek Hallquist made about you, entitled Denial. It is an extraordinary film, and I believe it can be streamed live online. Highlighted in the film are Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Patrick Leahy and others. Talk to us about this project that your son so beautifully captured about your life. Talk to us about that.
Well, my son, was following me closely on the work I was doing to get the grid ready for total decarbonization of our energy systems. So he managed to get a significant amount of funding from PBS, I think it was around 2011 or 12, to do a documentary about the work I was doing on climate change, moving the entire grid, energy system, electricity, smart grid, all these things I was doing, which fiber optic, by the way, is an important critical backbone for that infrastructure of solving climate change, but we won't go into that yet. But so anyway, so he followed me around. He has other revenue sources, but part of the work was following me around and on some of the important things I was working on. And about 2 years into it, I announced that I was, it shocked folks that I was going to transition. So he went back to PBS and the executive director, Eugene Jarecki, and said, "Got this problem." And they said, "Well, you're a documentary filmmaker. You have to figure out how to integrate that into the story."
And I think you literally came out at an energy conference, right?
Yes.
When you shed your Dave persona and adopted your Christine reality. So go on, keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to bring that up to my viewers. Go ahead.
So anyway, he, I didn't know how much he was struggling with my gender change, because he recognized me as this macho parent, respected me. I brought him up, cutting wood, splitting wood, logging, doing all this other stuff that was super male. And, running marathons, doing all this kind of stuff. So he was so shocked, but I didn't realize, he said to, when he learned, and you'll see that in the documentary, when he learned about it, he was struggling with it. And I said to him, this is your documentary. I said, if I don't care how it comes out, I want you to tell the truth. If I come out as the evil witch, I will still love you. So I didn't have any idea how he was putting that together until the LA premiere. And that LA premiere was in 2016. And that's when I realized how much he was struggling. He kept the secret too. He kept a secret about his struggling with my gender change. In that documentary, you'll see that he got I remember when he announced to me with pride, he got this 12-month project to do a documentary about the education system in China. So he was going out 1 week a month to China, putting it all together, and that was another PBS documentary. So he said, when I saw the denial documentary about he was doing that to escape from the reality of my being transgender. And you'll see that, I'll give away a part of the film. 3 months into that project, he realized, oh my God, I'm running away just like people are running away from climate change. So that helped.
And the film's called Denial. So it was his denial.
Right.
Not your denial. It was his denial, right?
And the point is, the struggle our family was having with my gender is the same struggle we have with climate change.
Well, maybe the same struggle that a lot of people have just with transgender. I mean, it's just the struggles that we all have. Well, tell my folks how they can see your film, your son's film.
Yeah, just go to YouTube and if you use the words Christine Hallquist denial documentary, it will take you right to it. Perfect. Because there's another denial documentary. So if you just do denial documentary, you'll
with your name, Christine Hallquist.
Right? Yeah.
So my viewers, please do that. Watch this film. It's actually an extraordinary film. So I want to talk about, now you did come out to terms with we talked about you being raised Catholic and how your family walked away from that faith when you were asked to get an exorcism. Now you and your wife remained married, I believe. She is amazing and was George Washington. She was George Washington this year on the Queen City Indivisible float at the Warren Parade. And you...
Oh, yeah. No, that wasn't her. That was George Washington at the parade. I'll correct that. That was a friend of mine, Amy Taylor.
But was your wife on the float?
No, she wasn't.
Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. I want to meet your wife sometime. But talk to us about your relationship and how she accepted your transition. And did she know from an early time in your marriage that maybe you were actually, her best girl soulmate?
Well, she 6 or 8 years in discovered my, and she thought it was a fetish. So she thought it would go away. So when I announced to her back in 2014 that I was going to transition, she naturally said, well, you won't be living with me then, which I don't hold that against her at all. She didn't marry a woman, and I love her dearly, but hopefully it's reciprocal. We're good friends to this day. I kind of announce her as my ex-wife, but legally we're married, and legally, we all of our finances together. We work with each other. We have, we're very much like. It's funny. We talk about how we get along so well, that maybe for some marriages it makes sense to be married and separated, right? So we've been separated since 2015.
So where are you separated? You mean in where you live?
Yeah. Oh, we don't live with each other. No, she.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, but she's accepted it, and you are now wonderful best friends.
Yeah, we're wonderful best friends. I'm not sure she's accepted it as the right term, because I don't think she wanted it. Yeah, she's adopted. Yeah.
And she hasn't remarried or
no.
And you haven't either.
No.
Okay. No. So and then you do have your 2 daughters and a son, and they've been supportive of you and everything. And I believe that you have a most exceptional, loving family. So yeah, I wanted you to go back and talk a little bit about your bout with cancer in 2013. Because that really helped you in your transition, I believe. But would you be willing to share?
I want to tell you how much it helped me.
So I want to hear about that because it was a challenging time for you when you believed you might die, but it helped you in your transition. Tell my viewers how.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a PSA test that went through the roof. And
what kind of cancer was it, by the way?
Well, it's theoretically prostate cancer, but there's a problem with that. And that's what created the confusion. They did a bunch of samples and couldn't find any cancer in the prostate. So it appeared to be prostate cancer. So it got over the heads of the doctors of Morrisville. So I went to Burlington with a specialist, Dr. Plant, who was wonderful. Dr. Plant was just an incredible doctor. He spent 6 months trying to figure out what was going on. Went in several times for more samples in the prostate. He says, it doesn't make sense that you have this cancer. So I got this call. It was March 11th, 2014, 5:30 p.m. Of course, I'll never forget it. Dr. Plant calls from the parking garage. He didn't know I was transgender. He says, so he worked up to it. He says, first thing he says, I know what's killing you. Your testosterone is killing you. And he says, and he keeps talking, and he's working up to recommend a bilateral orchiectomy, which is castration. Of course, he didn't know this, 4 days later, had scheduled an appointment with my doctor, I forget the term for it, but to start hormone replacement therapy, which involves a testosterone blocker and estrogen. So I announced to him, Dr. Plant, oh my God, that's exciting. What man got excited about getting castrated, right? So I'm so excited. I said, I didn't tell you this, I'm transgender. And next Monday, I've got a meeting to start transition. Now I don't have to take a testosterone blocker. So I thought I lost him. I said, Doc, are you still there? He said, no. I'm thinking, oh God, he thinks I'm crazy. He says, no. He says, this is even more strange. I started my career doing transgender reassignment surgery.
My God.
And then he said, do not tell that insurance company. You were doing this to save your life.
Wow.
I got the operation. Of course, it's the oldest operation of the book, right? We castrated everything for thousands of years. I get the operation. 4 days later, I'm at work, cancer-free forever.
Wow. What a divine intervention story. That is
it has to be, doesn't it? Statistically.
It's totally divine intervention. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I'm a spiritualist.
And I've been waiting, and I haven't had the opportunity. I'm waiting for some evangelist to come up and tell me how I'm damned. And I'm going to say, no, you don't understand. God's miracle saved my life.
Right. That is outstanding. And to say to you that testosterone is killing you. I mean, and it probably was killing you emotionally and mentally and spiritually most of your life.
I think so.
And bravo. So now the entire state of Vermont loves and cherishes you. You have been a deeply inspirational leader for so many in the LGBTQA world. Talk to us about some of the bright moments you have had helping folks embrace their need to be who they truly are meant to be.
You know, it happens to me on a regular basis, and almost every time it brings me to tears, especially with young people who come up to me. I mean, I won't mention names, but even in the past 2 weeks, I've been approached to say, you were an inspiration for me. And you have no idea what you did for me. I'm like, I didn't do it for others. I did do it for me, but you don't realize the power of coming to terms with your own self can have. It's just amazing how many times people come up to me and say that. And parents too, parents across the country, it happens to me.
It's really true. So, I'm going to segue now to our current state of the union. How do you comprehend that our country has moved so fast to the extreme right that we are so worried about potentially and really possibly losing our democracy? I mean, Christine, how did this happen? How did we go from Obama to all of this? I mean, what happened in our party?
Well, I think, if you look at Trump, he is definitely following the authoritarian playbook.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing is to create as much division as possible. So nobody trusts news sources. They don't trust each other. Therefore, they will only trust the dictator.
They don't trust Dr. Fauci. I mean,
they don't trust Yes, of course, they don't trust science. But that's how Trump's doing it. He's getting people to mistrust everything. And, as you'll see in my latest post, I came to the realization, I've been attacked by, I'm used to being attacked by MAGA since 2018, but all of a sudden I'm being attacked by Christian nationalists, by the anti-Israeli community, the anti-Palestine community. I'm like, why am I being attacked so much? Because we're playing into the authoritarian playbook. We're actually, if we're infighting and we stop trusting each other,
Right.
Now the dictator has more power. So I think this is clearly a dictator's playbook. And I hope we wake up. And, I really amazed that humans have lasted so long because we keep surrendering to these individuals rather than each other.
And to our worst virtues. I mean,
Yes.
humans are really kind of, I think, the most destructive species on the planet. So what words of wisdom do you give your family on how to navigate this present world that we're living in? What's your words of wisdom?
From my own, I started this podcast by saying how much joy I feel every day. And that is because two things: set a goal bigger than yourself, solving climate change. I know I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to, I'm going to work forever to do it. And you're always help others. If you think outwardly, you will find joy. You will never find joy thinking inwardly. And that was my realization with transition. Yes, transition brought me to a level where I had the opportunity to experience joy, but my joy comes from being able to shed myself and work for others. So that is the message I deliver my children.
That's outstanding. So what do you do for fun?
Well, I like to go fishing with my grandson. You talk about your grandchildren. I love my so I have my grandson in Saratoga. I have my grandson up the road here. So I love spending time with him. I'm going to make him into a musical buff because I can see his brain. I take great pride in turning my grandchildren into nerds, scientific nerds. So I don't, right now it's my grandchildren, and I, of course, you were very accurate. Our family, including Pat, we're very tight, and we love each other dearly. And now that we have 4 grandchildren, so.
And congratulations. Well, our time is run out, and I'm so sorry about that because I could talk to you forever. But you and I get together from time to time. I consider you one of my most favorite girlfriends, quite frankly.
Right back at you.
And I
Yes.
love it when you're willing to get together with me. But I just want to share with my viewers that, you are an inspiration, and the work that you've done, your brilliance in our utility systems, and now in our broadband systems, where you are getting broadband around the state, which is so important. Your work with the LGBTQA folks, and your political stance, where when there's a rally, man, you're up there. You're up there, girl, not man, but you know what I mean. You're up there behind the mic, and you are advocating and speaking out. And I think you're probably one of the most popular folks to get up on the stage to speak out on a lot of this stuff. And you're revered and respected on so many levels, Christine. And for that, I thank you for the honesty to yourself and the honesty for the rest of us and what you bring to our world and to the state of Vermont. And just keep on doing it. Keep on doing it, girl, because we need people like you. We need you. And
Thank you.
and I love you. And thank you so much for being on my show.
I love you too. Thank you.
All right. And to my viewers, I want to thank you for joining us. And I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.